distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Money is something we all deal with, but how many of us truly understand it? What if you could make better decisions with your money? Decisions that secure your future, protect your family, and bring you peace of mind. I'm Darren Jacobs, and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Now you don't need to register nothing. We can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
We believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploited the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1. Find the style number on the tag. Step 2. Match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3. Search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
SM Group International Limited,
your solutions partner for the latest innovations, brands, and competent staff to meet your needs. We provide products and services in the following divisions: executive services, event rental and services, power and heavy equipment, construction and property management, food and beverage, aggregate and sales and distribution. Check out more on our products and services at www.smgrouptt.com. Contact us at 221-7445 or email at info@smgrouptt.com. We are SM Group International, your solutions partner.
The best for your baby is at thebesttoys.com. From the best strollers, car seats, baby carriers, high chairs, booster seats, rockers, jumpers and bouncers, walkers, baby blankets, feeding accessories, bathtubs. Visit us in store at Forces Flagship McLean. Shop online now at thebesttoys.com. Order via call or WhatsApp at 332-BABY. And remember, we have the best toys at the best prices.
Folks, we're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
Because vision doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
Pastor J, I want to get a tattoo.
You really want
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, so we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
We are tackling the hard-hitting topics, some controversial topics, some topics we sweep under the rug. You don't always have to forgive in a relationship for it to move forward.
If it is you are in a situation where you forgive the person, but to the detriment of yourself, what are you really doing?
It is very uncommon for somebody in the younger age group to have dementia.
Atheists don't not believe.
Is that I can't disprove God, but you also can't prove God, so we kind of have a stalemate.
They'll focus on the woman who's being the victim,
right,
or the man is being the victim. We exclude the children.
Folks are trying to study the underlying brain mechanism to figure out how does this particular disorder happen in the brain? How is the brain processing this?
Don't worry about AI, worry about humans working with AI.
Are you willing to learn new skills to stay relevant for the future job market? That's the challenge that people are going to struggle with.
WESN.
Hello there, and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Well, Carnival festivities have concluded, and the main focus now is, of course, on the general election. Though that certainly was a part of the conversation since Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley announced his intention to resign before the general election. We do have a date, of course. In 10 days' time, the Prime Minister will depart from office, and it is expected that Stuart Young will be sworn in as Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. The focus now is purely on the general elections, which are expected to be held by August. Of course, I believe that there is a date set up until around November, of which the general elections can be held. But all that is happening across Trinidad and Tobago now focuses on this, and one of the major talking points within recent times is racial rhetoric on political platforms. Now, it's a topic I've tried to cover extensively previously to try and understand exactly how is it that we are still having these discussions and still having to face such rhetoric in 2025. And it's rather strange. No one seems to have a direct answer. I'm welcoming my guest this morning who recently wrote a column focusing on the racial rhetoric of one particular political leader and rejected, denounced it. Let's get into that conversation as I welcome this morning to AM Prime, my apologies, former special advisor and coordinator for the National Tripartite Advisory Council, Mr. Roy Mitchell. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Keaton, and welcome to your viewers. It's a pleasure being here.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mitchell. Let me start by asking you, I mean, as I've mentioned in my introduction, my preamble to this discussion, I've had many conversations on this particular topic, and it still baffles me as per how in 2025 this is still a major issue, a major talking point. Why do you think that this conversation has once more been stirred? Why do you think it's something that is still very much an issue in Trinidad and Tobago?
Keaton, I am just as baffled as you are, and I think many people are, that this conversation is still taking place in Trinidad and Tobago. The plain simple truth is that no government seems to want to take the lead in addressing the issue. Citizens like myself have raised it from time to time. We have included it in many types of proposals that we have submitted to the government and put on the public space as well. And it requires a determination on the part of both the government and the people. Notice I didn't say the opposition. The government and the people to come together and take a decision outside of the realm as far as possible of politics. This is about racial integration. This is about people living together regardless of their political affiliation, their class, their creed, their social standard. It's about people living together in peace and harmony, irrespective of what their prejudices may be. And in spite of numerous efforts that have been made in the past, some by the government, some by the University of the West Indies, some by individuals like myself, it appears as though no one is prepared to devote the time and attention that is required to tackle that issue head on. It is about the only reason I could advance. I know that during the 1970 revolution, the government took an initiative by hoping that the IRO, the interreligious organization, would have been the ideal agency to begin studying that particular problem and coming up with recommendations. I'm afraid that that never came into being, never came to pass. And these days, the IRO itself seems to want to opt out of anything that has to do with other than religious or spiritual matters. So we are stuck between that situation and the fact that no agency, not even the University of the West Indies or any other university, seems to want to take the lead in setting up some kind of institution to treat specifically with that issue.
But Mr. Mitchell, is there a need for an institution? I mean, one would argue that the IRO should play no role in political theater or comment on politics at all. At the same time, as you mentioned, there is still a need for these issues to be addressed. But is there really a need for an institution if political parties, politicians, and political institutions still see that adopting the race card is an effective strategy? If that is the case, an institution cannot do anything to prevent it from happening.
Well, it is not a question of the institution doing anything in particular to prevent it from happening. The institution will be the agency that will coordinate whatever discussions need to take place that could lead to a commonality of interest in respect of wanting to resolve the issue. There must be a coming together of the social institutions, the political institutions, the religious institutions. All the institutions of the country need to come together and set up some kind of mechanism whereby the problem could be studied, deeply studied, and solutions presented to the population with respect to how we think we should get rid of that problem that is really eating away like a cancer at our society.
Do you think amongst our population, amongst the citizens that make up the population of Transvago, that racial integration and racial harmony has been achieved? That this is only an issue that seems to pop up during an election season, but otherwise we haven't been able to achieve integration and harmony?
No, we don't. And I made the point, we may appear to have racial harmony, but that only happens instinctively when some special event takes place, like, you win a Miss World, a Miss World pageant, or you win a gold medal at the Olympics. We come together instinctively, and just as fast as we come together, we go back into our own corners when that particular aura disappears. We see racial integration is only a part of the issue. There are lots of other issues that impinge upon that need to be dealt with. Because there's a lot of division and a lot of anxieties and a lot of issues in the country that need to be dealt with. But no institution, no organization seems to be in a position either to be willing to bring these things together and discuss them, or alternatively put pressure upon the government to set up the institutional framework that will allow such discussion to take place. At this point in time, the most you could hope for is a meeting of the minds. That's where we start.
Oh, but Mr. Michel, wasn't the Council for Responsible Political Behavior supposed to be an institution with the influence to actually try and address some of these issues that you're referring to?
Yes, it is something I think that they identified in their code. But here you have it. You have the leader of the opposition, the political leader, the UNC, pulling out of that and offering the country no reason why she has decided to withdraw from that institution that was set up for the specific purpose of trying to ensure that during an election in particular, the tables are cleaned and people observe certain ethical standards, codes of conduct, and so on. And when one of the major political parties pulls out of that kind of institution, it tells you the kind of mindset that we are dealing with. And that is why I'm saying to you, we have to deal with this starting outside of the realm of the politics, because the politics tend to be the key thing that creates the environment for the issue to recur year after year at every election, and without an institution that will focus on this problem until it is resolved, we will get nowhere. It is not an ad hoc thing. It has to be a part of our nation building program of activities. And I try myself to introduce it in the context of a country that has a national purpose. We as a country, Heaton, we have no national purpose. We don't know where we are heading. We are just doing things on an ad hoc basis and calling it progress. But progress towards what? There are no clear visionary targets that we have in mind to which we want to aspire, and therefore we are operating in a vacuum. Things like, okay, interracial solidarity, industrial peace and harmony, being a law-abiding society, productivity and work ethic, being a prudent in our financial and economic policies. Things like that need to be identified clearly as cornerstones of of nationhood that we, Trinidad and Tobago, want to aspire towards. No one wants to take the initiative to coordinate those kinds of initiatives in such a way that the country could note that together we are heading in direction A or direction B. All we know that is year after year, we get a program of activities, we implement them, and we carry on from there.
Would you describe the situation? I mean, if we are going back to independence, there's often people quoting Dr. Eric Williams. I know that in your column, you even quoted Dr. Eric Williams on a speech about no mother India, no mother Africa, no mother Syria, no mother China, no mother Lebanon. And that quote is awfully familiar. It tends to pop up now and again. But in that regard, that seems to be used conveniently. What you've just described there seems like an absolute tragedy. If that is the case, would you say that we have made progress following independence to try and address these issues, or do we keep taking 2 steps backwards?
Well, you see, you have to put progress within the context that we use the word progress, the term progress. There's progress and there's development. You can make progress in doing something without achieving any development. I could make progress in moving from point A to point B, but in moving from point A to point B, I have not developed as an individual. So progress is a yardstick that is used to determine the extent to which to determine the extent to which you have developed, you have matured, you have grown. But we don't operate in that realm. We take what Dr. Williams has said. No country in the world will have a statement like that made to its people. And we don't use that statement to try to inculcate in even our young people that concept of who is our mother. Some of us still see Syria as our mother, we still see India as our mother, we still see Africa as our mother. When in truth and in fact, our mother is Trinidad and Tobago. And unless we come to that clear understanding who our mother is, then we are children of different mothers. And if your children of different mothers coming together, obviously represents a challenge. And the common mother to all of us is a mother that we should owe allegiance to at the expense of, but not necessarily ignoring our innate origins, like in the case of who we are as Indo-Trinidadians or Afro-Trinidadians or
Mr.
Czech.
Mitchell, not that I want to stray too much from the point of focusing on the fact that in 2025 we still have these issues, but you have to try and get to the root cause, which is obviously very difficult to do. Everybody will have their opinion, but if we're looking at Dr. Eric Williams, did he? I mean, that speech in itself, that quote, has been used, as I said, oftentimes conveniently from the very onset of Trinbago gaining independence as Prime Minister. Did Dr. Eric Williams ever do anything to help this situation? Did he ever do anything to genuinely create racial integration and racial harmony amongst the population? Or did he just use these quotes conveniently as well to his benefit as Prime Minister?
Those quotes are not convenient quotes, Keaton. Those are serious quotes. Those are quotes used by the person who we call the father of our nation. Those quotes are not convenient quotes. Those are serious quotes. And what Eric Williams couldn't take this country from independence to full development status. His role when he came on the scene was to begin the process. And he did that quite successfully. He began the process, took us from colonial status to self-government, to independence, to Republican status, and died after that. It is what's left to us to take it from there and build this country into what we want it to be. And in the process, he left us certain messages as any father would leave his children. And that particular no mother Africa, no mother India, so that was one of the most serious statements. If a country like South Africa could use that statement as a means of trying to bring its own people together, and if that same country could honor Dr. Williams for the role that statement that he has played in bringing South Africans together, what's wrong with us here in Trinidad and Tobago that we can't do the same thing and do it better? What's wrong with it? They took that statement seriously. We take it lightly. This is serious. This is very serious.
So is it that it all started to go downhill upon the death of Dr. Williams? Is that one of the points that you're making?
I'm not saying it went downhill. I'm saying that we didn't carry the discussion further. We have not carried that discussion further. A couple institutions have made attempts, like I myself have made attempts, but there's not a willingness, put it this way, there's not a willingness on the part of the political directorates to bring the society together. And when, as I say, one major political party could pull out of that code of ethics that was generated for the last couple of elections, when you could pull out of that, it tells you how deep-seated the problem is and how much more difficult it will be to eradicate that problem. But whatever it is, it has to start with a group of us coming together and addressing the problem. It may take generations to be resolved, but the longest journey starts with the first step.
Well, Mr. Mitchell, the other part about it is do you think that it is being ignored because there isn't a problem that we are in itself thinking or bemused at the fact that there probably isn't a problem, but we are seeing snippets of it and we are accepting of it as people?
Well, because there isn't a problem. When one political leader could be calling upon the nation to come together under one mother, and another political leader is saying otherwise, I mean, it tells you that something is fundamentally wrong. And this is not an issue that to be resolved overnight. It's going to take a lot of effort, a lot of study, a lot of thought, but behind it all must be one fundamental component, a willingness to come together as a people. If the willingness is not there, we could talk until the end of civilization. It's not going to happen. The willingness must be there. And it must be a willingness that is deep-seated, is sincere, is genuine, and is governed by a desire to see all of us live together in peace and harmony.
Mr. Michel, I want to thank you very much, not only for joining me on the program this morning, but of course your contributions to the national discussion via your continued publishing of editorials, and of course your contributions as can be read in one of our daily newspapers. Thank you very much, Mr. Michel, for your time this morning and your contribution to the conversation.
Thank you very much, Keaton, for having me here, and I thank the audience too for giving this discussion a hearing. Thank you very much.
All the very best to you, sir. Keep well.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will continue to focus on these issues and, of course, other issues leading up to the general election. It's not just a matter of the development that we've seen in respect to infrastructure, finance, and the economy over the last 5 years. It's also these issues in respect to nationhood and, of course, integration. We speak about regional integration very often when it comes to CARICOM. Within Trinidad and Tobago itself, how we achieved racial integration and racial harmony. I think everyone will have an opinion on that, of course. There'll be different arguments and different reasoning, but it's a conversation that we should never shy away from. So, of course, we will continue to focus on these issues as the campaign is in full swing. We take a break here on AM Prime. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
My name is Dr. Stephen Carroll, the CEO at Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist, and we are committed to making good private healthcare affordable.
For all your medical needs, including dental, radiology, laparoscopy, behavioral and mental health, along with many other services, contact us for more information at 235-5479.
Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Every word, every line, every paragraph depicts a real moment in someone's life. A father, a sister, a mother, a brother. We at Newsday are dedicated to you, the people, and through independent, unwavering journalism, strive to always bring your stories to life. Because your stories are more than just words. Newsday, independent and credible.
folks. We're back and better than ever.
Your show have always appeared to be a show that is focused on going to the cause or looking to the cause.
We hardly ever talk about the white-collar crime, though. We always talk about the ones that involve more as physical violence against individuals.
The citizens will only measure transmission when water starts to flow through their taps.
The Constitution doesn't talk about local election.
Contract mafia that's responsible for looting the country, and they own and operate these politicians.
So if you are running a country and you can't say nothing as a prime minister, please take up your bag and go.
It is not comparative to the murder figures, but it is in fact very high.
I believe he's protecting certain individuals.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378 or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm not to do with that.
And I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us this morning as we continue the discussion. As I mentioned, the campaign is now in full swing. There should be no more distractions. The Prime Minister says to exit office in 10 days' time. And as mentioned, it is expected that Stuart Young will be sworn in as Prime Minister. But focusing on the elections, another major issue, apart from rhetoric on platforms, is that of campaign finance reform. And I'm certain that you heard of that before. If you have not, well, let me enlighten you. It's something that has been on the table. There's been laws that's been on the table for the longest while in respect to addressing the issue of campaign and party finance laws in Trinidad and Tobago. And there's always a need to be a bit more, there's always a need for more clarity in dealing with these issues. But of course, sometimes you want legislation. Again, my favorite word this morning is to the convenience of those that sit in the Red House. I'm joined this morning by Mr. David Abdullah to have this conversation. Good morning, son. Welcome back to AM Prime. You've been a face on the platform for quite some time now.
Good morning, Keaton. Thanks for having me. I hope you know that you don't get bad reviews as a result of that. But it's good to engage in a conversation with you. The last time I was on, of course, I was with two of your other co-hosts at that time. We had an engaging discussion.
Indeed, and we hope to continue that this morning. But Mr. Abdullah, in respect to the legislation, it certainly exists to try and address campaign and party finance laws in Trinidad and Tobago, but it certainly seems to be, again, as with other pieces of legislation, is at the will and really at the hands of the government of the day and what they see fit. It's something that both sides of the bench have spoken about previously and have made promises to address, but here in 2025, nothing further beyond just the talk.
Yes, you're right. So, in fact, I'm aware that the PNM did make a commitment in its manifesto and on various public platforms that it would pass legislation to deal with party finance and campaign finance law regulations. Now, there was a bill, and it is known as the Representation of the People Amendment Bill 2020, which was laid in the 5th session of the 11th Parliament. That's a little bit complicated. But in other words, prior to the Parliament being prorogued in 2020, so as prior to the August 2020 general elections, this bill was laid and stakeholders were written to sometime in June, asking them to submit comments before the 22nd of June 2020. And that was a nonsense timeline because everyone knew the Parliament will end and there was no way, therefore, that the bill could come out of the Parliament, be passed before the elections. So it was relayed on October 24th in the House of Representatives, that's after the 2020 general elections. And so it has a slightly different name. It's the Representation of the People Amendment number 2 bill. So this is the second one. And so that bill is still alive in the 12th Parliament. So what happened in October 2020 is that it was then shunted into what some might refer to a cold storage, which is the Joint Select Committee of Parliament. And on that Joint Select Committee, it's chaired by Camille Robinson-Regis, and you have members of the PNM and the UNC, both from the House and from the Senate, and there is at least one independent senator on that committee. And it has remained before this Joint Select Committee from October of 2020 to now. So that is 4+ years. And of course, the bill was first laid in June of 2020. So it's going on 5 years now that this piece of legislation has been before the Parliament. The Joint Select Committee did write to stakeholders at the beginning of December 2020, asking for comments by the 27th of December 2020, which was a very short timeline given it was Christmas and all of that, for people to go through a bill which is over 80 pages long, and I have it in front of me here, and it's 85 pages long, and that does not include the notes to the bill, which go for about 9 or 10 pages. So it's a long piece of legislation. It's not like 5 pages. The Joint Select Committee then extended the deadline for comments by stakeholders to the beginning of March of 2021. And that then gave people more time to give comments. Now, since that time, the Joint Select Committee has simply made a short report to Parliament at the end of every parliamentary session. In other words, prior to the Parliament going on recess in June or July each year, the committee presents a report saying they've met 2 times or 5 times or 8 times or how many times they've met. They received stakeholder comments, and they would have a list of people who submitted stakeholder comments. And they also indicated in one of the reports that they had gotten a consultant to give them advice on the bill. But nothing further has happened. So the People's Roundtable, given the impending general election, had a a forum, as you know, on governance in November of last year. And one of the issues coming out of that clearly was constitutional reform. But that's going nowhere. The government had its National Advisory Committee on Constitutional Reform, chaired by Mr. Barendras Sinanan, and notable people were on that committee. They submitted a report in June of last year. The Prime Minister promised a big national consultation over 2 days. We heard nothing further, except that the PNM had its session in Napa, at which time the Prime Minister rubbished the one proposal of the committee, which was to have a mixed system of elected members of parliament, some first past the post, some by proportional representation. He rubbished that. And then announced the change in the coat of arms by removing Columbus's ships, and that's which was not, I don't think, a recommendation of the committee itself. So we then felt that, given, as People's Roundtable I'm speaking about now, felt that given the fact that constitutional reform was not going to happen this year, what we would focus on is one specific issue which the Parliament can address and pass, which is this Representation of the People Amendment Bill number 2 of 2020. So the People's Roundtable is pushing for the Joint Select Committee to complete its work immediately and submit its report to the Parliament and the full Parliament, and let the full Parliament then debate the report and pass the legislation before the 2025 general elections.
Mr. Abdullah, you've pointed out that this has passed through many hands. It's passed through various committees, and yet here we are. The last time I heard of this particular issue was, I think, on this platform as well with you, late last year, speaking about this very issue. The problem is, Mr. Abdullah, is why do you think that they have been constantly late, where they've legislation sits, and not just this in particular, but generally legislation sits there, it exists, but there seems to be a delay for whatever reason, whether it be hesitancy or an agenda in itself, in actually addressing these issues if they themselves have been put forward, whether it be by recommendations or, in the case of the PNM, a campaign promise of their own.
Yeah, and I mean, the PNM Attorney General then, who was Faris Al-Rawi, did have this piece of legislation prepared, and it was laid in the Parliament. So that was a step forward. And the basic reason is simple, they don't want the public to know who gives them big money and in what amounts. They don't want their finances to be disclosed. And the financiers themselves don't want their information to be made public. That's the bottom line. And both parties share a common interest in that regard, because neither of them declare to their membership the accounts with respect to party finances. I remember myself and Dennis Pantin and another colleague met with a then senior member, now deceased, of the PNM, and to discuss constitutional reform matters. And we raised this issue of campaign and party finance reform. And he said, listen, there are two books, There is the one that gets audited, that's the membership gets, and that deals with the headquarter, expenses, staff, and light bill and all the phones and that kind of thing. The basic things that a party would have, staffing and so on. And then there's the other one, and that it is not disclosed at all. And I remember speaking to Mariano Brown, I'm sure he will confirm it with you, who was treasurer of the party. And he said, listen, you see the money that goes for the campaign, that doesn't come through the treasurer's hands at all, There's just and the previous person, who was John Donaldson, who was then chairman of the PNM, said that is handled by a few people quite separate from the rest of the party executive. There may be members of the executive or whatever, but campaign finance is handled completely separately. There's no accounting for that whatsoever. Yes, and both of the major parties operate in that way, and the bill that is before the Parliament would require amounts above a certain, I think it's $50,000, and one could debate whether it should be less than that, to be publicly listed in a register that is available to any member of the public. And not only the amount, but who gave those amounts would have to be known to the public. And there's quite detailed legislation that would ensure that political parties, because at the moment political parties are not registered organizations. We register with the EBC, our symbol and that kind of thing, for the purposes
of course,
the
for the election day. Yeah.
That's right. Candidates, not the party, but candidates are required under the Representation of the People Act to report to the EBC expenditures. I think it's up $50,000 in a general election. It might be a little bit less for local government elections, right? But of course, candidates don't have to report what the party spends on the big election rallies, on the jerseys, on the ads, on radio, TV, newspapers, etc., right? That is where the big money gets spent by the parties, and there's no accounting to anybody under the existing legislation for that. And that is why this amendment bill would then require all campaign monies to be accounted for, and disclosure provided for persons who gave a certain amount above the $50,000 threshold. And there are limitations in terms of foreign contributions. There are also requirements for the parties to register. Now, it's interesting because companies must register under the law, and there's a registrar of companies. Some time ago, about 2 years ago, the government passed legislation in keeping with international anti-money laundering requirements. So NGOs and not-for-profit organizations must also now go through a very tedious process of registering and disclose financial statements, etc. But political parties don't have that obligation. And if there's anybody who is susceptible to getting dirty money, it's not an NGO, it's a political party, yes. They could be financed by people involved in money laundering, the drug trade, human trafficking, arms trade, and so on. And there's no accountability.
In theory, as well, Mr. Abdullah, from what you're suggesting, in theory, there is also the possibility that always exists that money laundering can take place through donating to political parties as well. And that's purely in theory. But Mr. Abdullah, why is this something that is crucially important for Trinbagonians to understand? I mean, if I'm a business and I'm making investments, and whether or not you see a donation as an investment or not, I don't necessarily want other people to know my business. That's my personal business, and that is my money that I'm investing, whatever the returns may be. Why is that of any concern to any other individual?
Because the issue then arises in terms of transparency as to who gets contracts and who are favored subsequent to an election. And the bill also provides for a timeline so that if a company gives a certain amount above a threshold, I'd have to look for the amount, then what happens is that they either cannot tender for a contract within a certain period prior to the election or subsequent to an election, or at least those tenders must then be disclosed publicly in relation to the contributions that they've made to the party. So we will also see that if Keaton is a big financier, if I put on my MSJ hat for a moment of MSJ, right? And Keaton then gets a cushy job subsequently, or his company gets a cushy job, then people could see a link between the financial investment made by Keaton and the returns on that investment subsequent to an election. And those things are also important for citizens to know. Because you see, the danger is that millionaires or billionaires could buy governments. Now, you might think that to be far-fetched, but I'm sure policies get made in Trinidad and Tobago based on that. And if we're not sure about that, just look to what is happening in the United States with Mr. Musk. Yes? And you will see what is that the billionaires have essentially bought the American state. So he has now access to all of people's private data, IRS data, Social Security data, all kinds of other data. Now, data is gold And the question is, what is Musk and his billionaire friends going to do with that data? And they get contracts and so on. So some of these tariffs on that Trump is imposing on imported cars, for example, he's giving them a 1 month break, might very well help Tesla, because Tesla might, So one has to see the links between people who finance campaigns and the rewards that they get or the benefits that they get subsequently.
I think it was in March of last year in San Fernando. So in fact, interesting enough, this topic is perhaps 1 year ago today. The Prime Minister indicated there was a meeting in San Fernando. I think it was conversations with the Prime Minister and whatnot, where he said that in 2024, campaign finance reform legislation will be laid in Parliament, will be brought to Parliament. That was 1 year ago. He identified the opposition as being a major hurdle in actually having this being passed and having support from the opposition for it to be passed in the House. Does this bill require a special majority in any way at all, or can the government actually proceed with this legislation being laid in Parliament and passing it on their own accord?
Okay, so that's a key question, and thanks for putting out that information. I didn't remember that. I mean, I know he made public statements, right? And of course, the bill can come out of the Joint Select Committee because the government has a majority of members on the Joint Select Committee. And so there's no reason why, it's similar with the Tobago House of Assembly autonomy bills, you remember, the opposition had problems with it, but it came before the full floor of Parliament, even though there was no agreement in this Joint Select Committee on what the provision should be. So where it is now does not require opposition agreement. It can come out of the Joint Select Committee onto the floor of the Parliament. Now, I looked at the bill carefully, and normally in a bill that requires a special majority, there is somewhere a reference that this requires a specific majority given section so and so of the Constitution. Yes, and nowhere in the notes, and unless I missed it, nowhere in the notes does it say that, and nowhere in the first clauses does it say that this requires a special majority. And so what they should do is bring it and let the Parliament say yea or nay, it requires a special majority, and then let us hear what the position of each of the two parties in Parliament is on this bill. Because, one of the problems that we have is the Joint Select Committee asked for stakeholder comments. And stakeholders, some political parties, civil society organizations did submit comments. But the PNM, neither the PNM nor the UNC submitted comments. Now they are stakeholder. So what they do is they withhold their party position from the Joint Select Committee. Official party position. Now they may be articulating it in the Joint Select Committee, but we don't know what those positions are. Unless, for example, the opposition submits a minority report or something like that. So we don't know what the positions are until it comes to the floor of the Parliament. And then we hear them speak. But really and truly, they should state in detail what are the positions of the party, their party, on this particular piece of legislation. But we won't know that until it comes out of the Joint Select Committee and on the floor of Parliament, which is important that we know whether they agree, yes or no, with all of the provisions of the bill. And the bill is not perfect. And so, I mean, there are some inconsistencies. So one clause says something, another clause might contradict it. So there are inconsistencies which need to be cleaned up. There are also consequential changes. So, for example, one particular clause says that trade unions are a permitted donor to a political party. But as I pointed out in our memorandum to the Joint Select Committee, that then requires a consequential change to the Trade Union Act, because the Trade Union Act specifically says that trade unions cannot use their members' dues to make a contribution to a party. So you have to amend that. So those are the kinds of things that stakeholders can comment on to try to improve the legislation, but we do need the legislation, and we should have it before the elections.
But there also needs to be caution in a party stating its position. Is a party's position of any concern? Does that trump the actual need for this legislation to be passed?
No, because at least we would know what their thinking is on the legislation, or the draft legislation. Do they agree, yes or no, with the provisions? Now, there may be some important changes that have to be made. For example, the bill provides that the Elections and Boundaries Commission will then become the regulator, the overseer of the legislation. And so they create a position that would not now the CEO of the EBC, but they'll create a position of a register of political parties, or registrar rather of political parties. And that registrar would be a person within the Elections and Boundaries Commission reporting to the commission itself. Now, okay, that's okay. But there is a point where they want the Elections and Boundaries Commission to be responsible for a fund that is to be created, which fund would be accessible by parties to fund some of its activities. And they want the commission to be the trustee of that fund and responsible for the investment arrangement. So, I pointed out that is too onerous a responsibility for Elections and Boundaries Commission. So the commission should be empowered by the law to hire a trustee in the same way that a pension fund hires a trustee for the trustee to then manage the fund. They don't really want people who are overseeing boundaries and all of that also having to be responsible for the management and investment of a fund. So there are things that could be improved in the legislation, and parties should say what their views are on it. If at least if they don't do that by a submission to the Joint Select Committee, which is now too late, we should know it by the bill coming to the floor of the Parliament, and then we would hear what the party's position is on the law. Because when it is debated, we will know whether they agree on this, that, or the other.
Coming back to the question I asked earlier in respect to whether or not there needs to be a simple majority or a special majority, can parts of this legislation actually be passed? If there's difficulties getting the support of the majority of the House, are there certain parts of this legislation that can actually be passed that can still be beneficial, of course, leading up to the general elections this year?
Yes, I think so. Certainly for parties to register, for parties to provide to the EBC their constitution, for parties to provide audited financial statements to the registrar of political parties, those things could be passed. And that in the audited financial statements, there must be accountability not only for headquarter financing, but for other expenses as well. There's another provision which I think is very useful, and that is that there would be taxpayers' money to go into a fund which parties could access, not for campaign expenses, but for headquarter expenses, things like staffing, education programs, things like that. I think that is very useful. That would help certainly other political parties other than the two in Parliament to get some resources to support the work that we do, because as Dr. Williams said, democracy rests, if I could just pick up that quote, democracy rests on not just the Parliament, but democracy rests, oh yes, here it is. This is a quote by Dr. Williams in 1962, part of his independence message to Trinidad and Tobago. Democracy finally rests on a higher power than Parliament. It rests on an informed and cultivated and alert public opinion. The members of Parliament are only representatives of the citizens. They cannot represent apathy and indifference. They can play the part allotted to them only if they represent intelligence and public spiritedness. The development and expansion of that interest is the joint responsibility of the government, the parliament, the political parties, and relevant civic organizations. That's a very important. And off air, you were asking me about, did Dr. Williams do all that he did? That's I think was an important position for Trinidad and Tobago to take forward. Now, do the parties engage in education and to raise, the developed, informed, and cultivated and alert public opinion? I don't think they do. They do propaganda and agitation that will encourage people to engage in all kinds of nonsense and so on, bad talking this one and bad talking that one, and engaging in other kinds of baiting, which is not informed and cultivated and alert public opinion. So contributions coming out of a state fund going to parties to engage in that work, I think, would be important. And there's also in the legislation, the draft bill rather, provisions for restricting advertisement by government agencies, state companies, prior to an election that could be considered campaigning. You know how ministries like to put out full-page ads with all their achievements just before an election. The bill says you can't do that. It provides for state television and state media to give equal access to all parties. It also says that private media must also have a certain amount of fairness in terms of in other words, you can't charge one party $1,000 a minute and charge another one $200 a minute for an ad on television. Yes? So those things, I think, can be passed. The requirement to disclose funding for campaigns, that I don't think that would require a special majority, but because the registration of NGOs, I don't think required a special majority, but I could double check that. Yeah. So there are things that could be passed that would take us a step forward.
Now, you mentioned at the start of this conversation that you're hoping it's something that is addressed before the general elections are held this year. But as a citizen viewing this morning, why should I even be bothered by this or concerned about this? I already know that there are issues, and in the local parlance, a bubble takes place behind closed doors. All right, cool. I get that it is happening, but that doesn't bother me. It doesn't affect how much money is put in my account every month, whether or not my pension will be increased or decreased, whether or not taxes will be increased or decreased. It doesn't affect me because it doesn't mean that crime is going to go down. And there are serious issues plaguing Tobago that affect me personally. Why should I even be bothered by this? Why is this of importance now?
Yeah, because the power of money is becoming much more significant and important than the power of the vote. And that is why it is important. So you just say crime, for example. Why is there no action on white-collar crime in this country and corruption? Why is it that the Financial Intelligence Unit can report thousands of suspicious transactions every year to the Parliament, totaling billions of dollars, and there are no convictions or investigations? Nobody is charged for any of that activity. And that is because big money crimes, white-collar crimes, which themselves are significantly behind the violent crimes that take place in the country, are not being addressed because the people who have the money are not going to be touched because they finance the parties. It's as simple as that. Simple as that.
I get the impression.
Even take tax revenue. The government complains about the fact that billions of dollars are not collected in tax revenue every year. So if those billions of dollars were collected every year, we wouldn't have a deficit. We would not be running up a debt. We would have more money to deal with hospitals and roads.
But isn't that the whole point of a revenue authority? Isn't that the whole point of this new revenue authority existing?
Well, that is the rationale that the government is using to to deal with the Revenue Authority. But I have heard from politicians, very senior politicians, that the real truth is that the people with money who finance the parties don't want to pay more tax. That is a real situation, and therefore they're not interested in pressing taxation because they're the people who finance the party. Yes.
Mr. Abdullah, I will tell you that I appreciate your time this morning because you did go through various aspects of the legislation that exists, and these are certainly important things. For
That are
example,
proposed. The legislation that it doesn't exist. The bill exists.
The legislation that's proposed. Thank you for correcting me on that.
the
Yes,
bill
thank you for
exists,
correcting me on that. But I want to this time let's pause this conversation here. It certainly is a lot to take in, a lot to digest. But thank you for raising the point, and it's very interesting. In fact, as you were speaking, I did do a quick search. And it was exactly 1 year ago to this date. 1 year ago to this date that the Prime Minister made those comments. You know, so quite interesting how that worked out.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you got that information for me because I have a letter that has to go out from the People's Roundtable based upon what we discussed at our when we had our public forum last month on the 15th, I think it was, of February, to go out to civil society organizations who knew about the forum, asking them now to sign on to our call for this bill to be debated and passed before the general elections. And I reference what the PM said a year ago, because that's an excellent starting point for my letter. So thanks, Keaton, for sharing that with me. Excellent. Appreciate it.
No problem. Let's hope I don't get in trouble.
No, you simply gave us the facts, so that's all right.
Well, Mr. Abdullah, thank you very much for your time this morning. All the very best. You know, we look forward to the next conversation.
Thanks, Keaton. Take care. Best.
All the very best. Take care. Ladies and gentlemen, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley, during, I think it was conversations with the Prime Minister, questions to the Prime Minister, how it was raised, that took place in San Fernando exactly 1 year ago. It actually took place on the 5th of March 2024, and he indicated that the government will bring forward that legislation sometime within the year of 2024. 1 year later, that has not happened. He has indicated that he believes that the issue it was in respect to getting the support from the opposition as well. But that is why it's very important to understand whether or not the legislation, the proposed legislation, thank Mr. Abdullah for correcting me on that, needs a special majority or a simple majority. But regardless, at this point, it's been a year. I wonder where the Prime Minister still stands on that issue, though it will not be up to him now because he departs office in 10 days' time. So, ladies and gentlemen, a lot to look forward to in the coming weeks and the coming months. Not necessarily good, but not necessarily bad. It's the future of your country and the future of your nation, the future of our lives that are at stake. Let's take a quick break here on the program. When we return, we'll get into a couple of news stories and then we'll wrap up this morning's proceedings. Stay with us.
Do you need treatment for obesity or any related abdominal procedures? The community hospital now offers minimally invasive laparoscopic surgery done by an American-trained, board-certified surgeon with over 20 years' experience. Give us a call at 235-5479 for more information.
The Community Hospital of Seventh-day Adventist,
where good private health care is affordable.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website, www.fanzonett.com, for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website, fanzonett.com, to make your purchase today.
Welcome back to AM Prime, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being with us this morning. So, focusing on all that is happening. I know I said that the carnival is over, and we're focusing on the election. I'm also wondering this morning because if you get a chance to read the newspapers, if you haven't done so already, but of course, carnival is still dominating the headlines. There seems to be controversy surrounding the road march results for this year in respect to a tabulator who seemed to have spoken a bit too much, more than she should have. She was, of course, removed. That is from her responsibilities. Yet it did very little to actually help the situation because Marshall Montano, of course, has won his 11th Road March title, tying with Lord Kitchener, Alwyn Roberts, for the uh, most number of Road March titles. But Ian Alvarez, Bungie Garland, has indicated that himself and his wife are actually now contemplating whether or not, and I don't want to say it's certain, whether or not they will participate in such competition in the future. Now, for years, ladies and gentlemen, I have been hearing talks. For years, I've been hearing talks that there exists a soca mafia when it comes to Marshall Montano. I don't know whether or not that is true. Oftentimes, you wonder though whether or not situations are created for his benefit. For example, looking at the Chutney Soca Monarch, it was a good song. Pepper Vine was a good song, but I don't know if it was worthy of actually winning Chutney Soca Monarch. I mean, Marshall Montano spoke for the majority of his performance. So on what grounds was he awarded Chutney Soca Monarch? That is just my observation. I'm not saying he deserved it. Maybe the judges saw something I didn't see, and kudos to them. In respect to Road March, well, it's supposed to be a bit more straightforward. They simply count the number of times that this song is played or that a song is played when bands are crossing the stage. And it was quite close this year. But again, I think the comments on the parts of the tabulator were very unfortunate. There was no need for that on her part. And it, of course, already raised eyebrows in respect to the integrity of the judging as it relates to this number of times these songs were played. So the integrity there are low. Now, Ainsley King, who's president of Tuco, so to clarify this, saying that no risk would be taken, no soca mafia exists. I really don't know whether or not this soca mafia exists or who's part of the soca mafia, but it's not the first time, and I'm talking about years and years and years, that this soca mafia exists with the directive to play or push only one particular artist song. And who knows, maybe that happened this year, maybe it didn't. But again, controversy surrounding that. Congratulations to Marshall Montana, of course, on his win. But I think there are a lot of questions to be answered. I mean, we have some questions in respect to this. But that being said, again, congratulations to Marshall Montano. The most Road March titles, tied with Lord Kitchener and Roberts, of course, but the most decorated soca artist of all time. I think it's 11 Road March titles, 5 Soca Monarch titles, 1 Chutney Soca Monarch, which he won this year, and 1 Calypso Monarch, which he won last year. So, of course, this really has set the platform to be considered the greatest of all time when it comes to soca artists in Trinidad and Tobago. But the other major issue, apart from that controversy, is how would you describe this year's carnival in respect to safety? According to the Commissioner of Police, or the acting Commissioner of Police, let me correct myself there, he's quoted saying it was a generally safe one, a generally safe carnival. Now, that word generally, boy, that word generally. I have seen in carnival, you're never going to have a completely incident-free carnival. I understand that. I get that. I recognize that that in itself is a point. However, we're under a state of emergency. We are under a state of emergency. So to have an incident where within a crowd, and I'm guessing conflicting reports here, within a crowd, and 4 individuals were shot. 1 was killed. 3 others were injured. That that baffles me. No, I know that the TTPS cannot police everyone, and it's going to always be difficult to stop these attacks. I mean, it happens all over the world, despite other security agencies across the world probably having better equipment, better technology, better intelligence gathering capabilities as compared to the TTPS. But it's just very difficult to swallow, especially us being under a state of emergency. Now, one report I'm reading is that uh, an individual was confronted by the deceased. It is suspected that he was confronted by the deceased, and an altercation ensued where an individual pulled out his firearm, still not so sure whether or not it's licensed or not, and shot at the individual. But in the process of shooting the individual, because he feared for his life, 3 others were shot. Well, one, FUL training would suggest that that wouldn't happen. We are shooting at an individual, 3 others are going to get shot in that. FEL training, again, looking at it from a human perspective, it's very hard to try and reduce the risk to all that are involved, especially when bullets are flying. I get that. But to say that he pulled out his firearm and shot at the individual because he feared for his life, where was he aiming at? Who was he shooting at? Because 3 others got shot. And I'm just wondering if it's also a case of the individual being intoxicated. So all that has to come out publicly. All of that has to be stated publicly. The other report that I'm getting is that an individual, and this is from eyewitnesses on the drum, the individual walked through the crowd and opened fire. So was it an altercation or was it a targeted hit? I don't know. But to then have the commissioner of police noting that I think there were 5 or 6 homicides over the weekend, stating that it was generally safe. It's difficult to swallow. Now, again, ladies and gentlemen, understand, you ain't going to be able to police everyone. But in the same breath, the police were actually speaking heavily about their operations, where I think they had 47 police operations in the span of 48 hours. And Senior Superintendent Winston Maraj, head of the Criminal Investigation Department, said efforts to weed out criminals began before they could even reach the city boundaries, with them abandoning knives, scissors, and various sharp metal objects. In fact, there's a photo that is available. They were abandoned before these individuals could even enter the city of Port of Spain. So that's good on the TTPS's part. That's good. That's excellent, and I'm glad to see that, and well done. But again, being under a state of emergency, it's hard to swallow that these things took place. And I have to be honest with you, I wasn't necessarily out and about all over the place over this weekend. In fact, on Tuesday, I stayed home. Tuesday, I didn't go anywhere at all. But from Friday to Monday, when I was out, and the places where I was out, and there were carnival activities taking place in large gatherings, I did not see one police vehicle. In fact, to be quite honest with you, I didn't see a police officer. I was looking. I didn't even see the defense force out. I was looking because we are in a state of emergency. I was wondering where was this person? Not a police vehicle, not a police officer, nobody from the defense force. Were they in plain clothes? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, honestly, sometimes I really wonder. It was a generally safe carnival. All right, let's take it. Did the incidents mark carnival? It depends on who you're asking. For me, it certainly did, because of the comments coming from the Minister of National Security early on Tuesday morning when he did his walkabouts in Port of Spain, of the comments coming from the chairman of the NCC saying that it did not. It depends on who you ask in respect to masqueraders. Maybe they weren't affected by this at all and they had a superb time. That's great. But one foreigner was actually injured in this particular incident. And that leaves a stain. It leaves a lasting impression. So I would say to the police officers who were out and who were carrying out their duties, thank you very much. Well done. But For being under a state of emergency, I did not see a police vehicle. I did not see a police officer. I did not see defense force officers. And these are at public carnival events. I am not talking about at fetes. I am talking about at various points where jewelry celebrations usually occur, where you have TTPS actually putting up barriers because this is where they occur. And I'm talking about for carnival celebrations and masquerade as well. This is where they occur. So, at the end of it all, was it a safe carnival? Depends on who you ask. Anyway, that's it for AM Prime this morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. And of course, thank you very much to my guests for joining me on the program. Of course, the election season is in full swing, and we will continue to focus on such topics. But if you have any contributions that you'd like to make to AM Prime, if you'd like to be heard on AM Prime, if you have an opinion or a thought in respect to topic, feel free to reach out to us. We actually do get your contributions via email and of course via phone calls throughout the course of the day. So feel free to contact us. The number is on your screen and the email address is also on the screen. Reach out to us and we'll be certainly glad to work with you in facilitating that conversation. To my team, Ryan Gomez-Burke and Mildwood, thank you very much. And of course, Naomi McNish for her efforts in producing the program. And of course, for me, Keaton Shaw, it's a reminder that today is a good day to have a good day. Make it a great one. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.
WESN.
Between the Bank and the Gutter, a novel about street dwellers in Port of Spain. This is a book to make you both laugh and cry. Above all, it takes you to that special space that only street dwellers know. In this moving and riveting human interest story, Harry journeys from insanity to sanity while living on the streets of Port of Spain. Now available at Metropolitan Books, 12 Aripita Avenue, Woodbrook. Paper-based bookshop, 14 Alcazar Street, Woodbrook. WESN, 30A Gattaca Street, Woodbrook. And the home store branches located at Barataria, Shogunas, and East Gates Mall. Autographed copies now available on request. Also available